Man, if you're in the game long enough, you work out long enough and hard enough, and it's part of your life, inevitably stuff's going to come up, man.
You could play chess and compete in chess, and at some point you're going to get injured because of chess. I'm just saying, it doesn't have to be hard.
Injuries,
anything is going to happen.
Injuries are a thing. Discomfort is a thing, right?
Yeah.
But kind of determining what's an injury versus what isn't an injury. Like, am I hurt or am I injured? Kind of question.
Yeah, that was the two categories we had for athletes in the college world. Was, are they hurt or are they injured? Injured, they need to go see a medical professional and get kind of diagnosed and figure out, could be like a fracture or a tear or something like that, something very detrimental. Hurt is something you can play through. It's going to be a little uncomfortable, but you just got to thug it out. Yeah,
I think you got to thug it out. There's pros and cons to that. I did a lot of thugging it out, and it turned that being hurt that probably turned into injuries, not even necessarily in the area that was hurt, but because I was protecting it or compensating around it, it turned into an injury.
Yep.
But there's other things that, like you mentioned, that are very acute. And it happens when you work hard and play hard.
Yep.
100%. I've got multitudes of things that I could talk about. I won't bore people with my story, but my low back is a dumpster fire. If you want to see the x-ray, I'll show it to you. It's pretty messy. I've been fortunate, haven't had any knee injuries. I had a complete dislocation of my right talus. Basically, I was laid into the brake pedal on a car and had a hat on, and that ankle or that foot completely turned around, faced the wrong direction, was facing back at me. So I had to have the thing reduced. It was in a cast for a while. I was fortunate, I actually didn't break anything. I don't know how that happened, but that was a thing, which is probably a good deal of why my back is messed up. I came back from that. I played football. I was super, I was able to stay active, but it was a thing. That's an injury, right?
An injury.
My back's definitely an injury. I have multiple shoulder issues. I've never had surgery on them, but I got both my labrums are torn. But it doesn't stop me from pushing, pulling, pressing, doing any of that stuff.
So the bottom line up front is we're just a miracle Scott's sitting here with us right now today.
and then plenty of broken bones. I got multitudes of them. I've been when I was by the time I was 17 years old, I was like first name basis with everybody at the ER at the hospital my mom worked at. Like, why are you back here again? Like, and how old are you again? And it's like, why is your arm broken? Like, well, I was doing a thing. They're like, Jesus, how old are you? 18? I'm like, yep. And they're like, geez, you're old enough to know better by now. What are you doing out there? But those are acute things that are going to take intervention, right? And at a higher level, oftentimes. And you mentioned things like evaluation, assessment, diagnosis, and then like a return to play plan, which often isn't the same person that did the assessment, the evaluation, the diagnosis. Might move on to the next professional, which could be like an athletic trainer, a physical therapist, a physiotherapist, however you want to term that, who is competent, both, and I would say both obviously in the very specifics on the medical aspect of things, but also culturally competent to what it is that you're doing. Because if you're a football athlete and that's how you make your living, or you're you're a professional law enforcement officer who makes his living that way that needs to get back to the team, like, does that person understand what you do and what return to play actually looks like for you? So that's something to consider if you're injured versus you're hurt. And like, what does that mean? So I just kind of time out. You guys heard my little story there. You ever had any injuries?
Yeah, a complete ACL, a meniscus tear, and playing high school ball senior year, and then went on and got surgery, and then played college ball, and then CrossFit.
And then the CrossFit history, obviously. Yeah. And you were still able to perform at a very, very high level.
I had a good PT, like you said, who essentially gave me a good plan. Not a good doctor. The doctor's not giving me a good plan. That's not their job. If you find a good doctor that gives you a good plan, you hold on to that person for the rest of your life.
Or knows like the allied health professionals to put you in front of.
Because most of the time it's, just don't exercise for a long time.
Oh, it drives me crazy.
Dude, what?
Yeah.
Like,
if they tell you to stop doing something that you have to do for work, find somebody else. Yeah,
that's the thing. That's what I mean about being culturally competent, is like, what does this person understand what you need to do? So hurt versus injured, how do you train through injury? How do you work through that injury? And not like, obviously we cannot break down all the very specific things. You have your very specific experience with the ACL and meniscus injury. And you had a very specific treatment and plan, right? The surgery went a very specific way, the recovery went a very specific way, and your training went a very specific way as a result. What we have to be careful of is when people get injuries and getting advice from people that, like, as an example, like if Hep's trying to tell me how I need to rehab a knee injury based on his experience, he's not an expert on ACL tears and repair because he had an ACL injury and repair. Then that oftentimes that comes out. You're like, who should I be pulling advice from? That's a challenge when you're injured. So first off, understanding, like, am I injured or am I hurt? And that might mean obviously going and getting an evaluation from somebody that's qualified to diagnose what between the two. Mm-hmm. And then obviously the next steps from there is like, well, how do I keep going? If you got an ACL and meniscus tear, those are come in varying levels and varying degrees. And sometimes you can continue to stay active, doing the thing that you do. And you may be able to work around it and train around it and still do that stuff, no problem. Sometimes you got to have surgery, which presents a whole nother set of challenges or that you'll have to find solutions for. But again, in the world that we live in, I hear this frequently. I have this thing of something, right? It's a knee, it's a back, it's a shoulder. Those are the three most common
ones that we see in law enforcement for sure. Everybody, at least one person in every single team will have one of those three.
And the other interesting thing here is, and I don't know the answer to this, so I'm not I don't have any dispositions on this, but how are they getting those injuries most of the time? Is it on the job or off the job or doing something related to the job?
A lot of it comes from poor training, overuse injuries, and then mainly, like if we're getting specific with the back and the knee, or mainly the back, it's just what they're wearing for work. It happens because they're sitting in a car in a plate carrier with a belt on, and it causes anterior pelvic tilt, which causes other things to compensate. And so the back is going to be like, ow. Right. And then there's other things that are needing to be addressed.
That's the word I think you should delve into more, is like the compensation. Because like that's a huge one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like what's cumulative versus what's acute, right? And you may become acute because of this cumulative overuse type of thing. But like, how can we get out in front of this, right? As part of it, and that's a kind of a whole other podcast, I think, for sure. Like, specifically when we're talking about the back, and a lot of it has to do with like what's in your programming and how are you using your programming to counteract the risks that are associated with the things that you do on a daily basis. Anyway, there's no such thing as doing an injury prevention program. You cannot call it that. What you can do is you can work to be really strong, right? Mobile in the right places you need to be mobile in, flexible in the places you need to be flexible in, have endurance, capacity to withstand things over time. Again, going back to the capacity piece, so that you're set up for success, and hopefully that helps you avoid things. But inevitably, things happen. And
you're building resiliency, not preventing injury, because there's obviously things that are going to happen, like ACLs. A lot of them in football are non-contact.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
I'm just doing, I'm cutting.
Yep.
No one's around me.
Exactly.
And I got sniped from 500 yards away.
From
air. Yeah. But then going off to what you said of like, there's not an injury prevention program. Now it's like, hey, how do I prepare myself to get stronger in areas to protect me in the future? I'll go to ACL surgery, but now when I get done, it's, hey, if you want to not have this issue again, go get a really good posterior chain. Go get a really good hamstring. And that's what I went and did.
That was the answer.
That was the goal. Yeah.
And so that's the unfortunate part about it, is a lot of people don't start addressing this stuff until after the fact.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, because that happens to all of us. Like, you're like, oh, well,
now you're forced to address the problem.
Yeah. Now I know what it looks like and prepared for it in the future.
I think a big problem with the law enforcement is they're tough. They want to be mentally tough. They don't want to come off as weak by any means in the team. And so what they do is they train harder and harder and harder to try to push through whatever they're feeling, and then it becomes an injury.
Yeah, and so the work around or work through is to overcompensate in some other area or try to ignore it until it gets to a point where they can't ignore it anymore. And so what it started out as kind of being hurt, and now it's turned into being injured, right? And that's what we're trying to avoid. And how do you do that? Well, it starts with a solid assessment of where your weaknesses or deficiencies and your strengths are, and making sure that you have a program that supports both of those. So you're getting that the push-pull there, if you will. And I mean that sort of in a larger sense. Like making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success, and we're doing the best we can to try to avoid the things when they come up. But more importantly, like if the thing comes up, put ourselves in a position from a resiliency perspective to return to play as quickly as possible.
I think one thing you haven't touched yet is like when you're on a program of that nature, it's do you have someone doing the program that cares enough about you for you to reach out to them and to work around it?
100%.
So like if I'm doing a program with Aaron and I tore my ACL, like, do I have the ability, just start off with the ability, binary. Can I get a hold of the person doing my program and saying, hey, Aaron, like I can't do squatting for the next 8 weeks. Is there something to work around that? And then hopefully you have a coach that is capable of responding back to you and saying, heck yeah, man, we're going to get really good. You're going to get jacked from currently, or whatever the case may be. We can work around the injury and provide you another solution to keep you still moving.
So I love that point that he just made there, because Aaron and I were talking about this offline. I think, well, actually, you may have even just said it out loud there too. Is like if somebody's telling you to stop doing something that's a requirement for your life and job, like just don't do this anymore. Like it fries me,
There's a time and a place for it.
I agree.
For sure.
I agree. But like, okay, give me a basis for telling me.
I need you to stop squatting for 8 weeks, but not like I don't want you to squat for the rest of your life.
Right. Or like you need to be able to squat to get off the toilet or get into and out of your car. Like there's that. But what are we saying? Like, what's actually being said there, and how is that person receiving that information? So
they should be explaining the why instead of just don't do this. Don't do this because whatever.
There should be a follow-up question to that. Okay, what can I do, or more specifically, what should I be doing so that I can return to be able to do that in some capacity, so that I can figure out what that is for me, whatever it is. Like, what is the right dose? What is the right range of motion? All those kinds of things. Typically, the guy sitting in the white coat with the stethoscope hanging around his thing with the little name tag that says MD on it is probably not the right guy to be telling you those things. I'm not bad-mouthing doctors, but I'm just saying.
I had a cyst in my wrist, so for you, I mean, it wasn't like a compensation. It's just when you do a lot of things that I do, like it just happens, you know? And so had a cyst, couldn't really do a whole lot of, is this flexion? What is this?
That's extension.
Thank you.
Flexion.
So extension, couldn't really extend very well. That includes front rack, handstand push-ups, which we don't do. Okay, so handstand push-ups, everyone's like, thank God. Right, so a lot of things like that, front rack couldn't hold very well in this perspective, and went to a doctor, and the guy literally told me this. I'm just here to just get you all riled up. Is what I'm trying to do right here, Scott. But the guy goes, doctor, white coat, stethoscope, down at KU Med, goes, hey man, so what do you do for this? I said, I do CrossFit. I don't say CrossFit because it tends to have a really bad connotation, so I say Olympic lift, which is a little bit better. And he goes, well, you just can't do that the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And I looked at him, I go, excuse me? He's like, just the rest of your life, you just can't do that. And I'm like, how much did you pay for your degree? Right. I'm like, this is the most worthless piece of advice. I stormed out. I was so mad. I was like, this is ridiculous. So I just left, and it over time, it just got better.
The modern medical, I'm going to call it sick care model, not healthcare model, has created this where, and unfortunately, a lot of our law enforcement officers have medical plans that are through places like Kaiser, as an example. And I'll badmouth Kaiser all day long from personal and professional experience. I'm not saying all the doctors there are bad, all the staff there, administration is bad. But what I'm saying is the majority of the experience I've had there has been poor, and it's gotten worse because they're trying to streamline things and save money. And with that comes answers like that to questions. Or if you don't like stomp your feet on the ground, yell and scream, say, no, I want the next level of care and advocate for yourself, you're not going to get it. And so part of it is setting yourself up, for that, and like knowing like these are likely the answers you're going to get up front. That doesn't mean it's the only answer. We need to find an answer for you. So again, getting into like the training through or with injuries piece, like how do you do that? Well, first we have to have an understanding of what the issue is. Like we need to know what that is. And so going back to the assessment evaluation, and then the degree to which that is a problem, right? And because that will then set us up with a platform to at least have a baseline for like, okay, what's next? The next thing is to throw out we talk about like what the basis of what we do is to increase and enhance movement. And so you need to move, right? People need to move.
It is medicine.
It is the medicine, right? And it is a requirement, right, for life, and particularly the subpopulation that we're talking about here. They got to be able to move. So we got to get them moving. So if you've got, again, it's a knee thing, an ankle thing, but again, going back to the three basics, the shoulders, the knees, in the back. Like, we got to get you moving. We've got to get you doing things. And there are tons of things that you can do that are way beyond that piece of paper that gets handed to you when you go to the physical therapist's office and they go, okay, you've got this general back problem. Don't even get me into how that was diagnosed and, and all that other stuff. I could go on hours about that, but hands you a piece of paper and says, do these exercises. We'll show you those things. You're going to get heat. You're going to get stim. Then you're going to get a little ice right at the end. After you go through these 5 exercises, do these for 5 weeks, and then you'll be on your way because, after that, you've timed out of the amount of physical therapy that you're going to get. People listening to this that have had this problem before, face these things, know exactly what I'm talking about. Did you get better, right? Was that the right return to play plan for you? Or was that just to maybe mitigate a little discomfort and a little bit of pain to get you to function in society versus actually be able to perform at your job? That's a thing. So when you're training through these things, it may start with something like that, right? It may be that acute. You may have to start there, but where is this going and how do we start to implement things in there to make it better? And just doing that and still doing the same thing 8, 10, 12, 16, 24 weeks or, a year from now, we're not progressing anything. We're not finding the end ranges of things. What I mean by that is your threshold, like what's enough versus what's too much. What within the movement patterns that we know you need to be able to do, like what exercises are being prescribed, how do we modify things? Again, maybe that barbell back squat isn't the right thing for you. It doesn't mean you can't squat. It just means we're not going to be throwing a barbell on your back for a little while, but doesn't mean we can't build back to that either.
It's something the sports world does really well in a good organization is they have athletic trainers, they have outsourced PTs, strength and conditioning coaches that are all communicating. And they talk and work to get this athlete back to what is the standard. So they go to the AT regularly, they get their workups, they get treated. Maybe if they need to, if it's a more severe injury like an ACL, they go to a physical therapy who comes in, or they come in and work with them, and they're all communicating, hey, strength coach, here's what needs to be done. Here's the workout, or what's the workout today? Okay, they can't do this. Let's find a sub for this, and they work in it. And essentially, they try to get them back on track as quick as possible because the main thing is playing.
And it's collaborative. And again, it's like they understand what the job, quote unquote, job is of this person that are trying to get them back there. You are not the same. Right? You are not the same as the person out on the street who is not an athlete. This comes back to being an athlete and treating our law enforcement law enforcement officers as if they were athletes and trying to get them in the mindset of, I am an athlete. I need to train like that. I need to take care of my body like that. I need to have the mindset of like, what are the specific things that I need to be doing to perform my very specific job on a regular basis at the highest level. And so stopping doing what you need to do is not the right answer. And this starts to get very individualized based on your who you are as a person, what your previous history is, what it is now, and where we're trying to get to. But I still think we can talk about it in the sense of, look, again, and the squat's a great example. Like, just because you can't necessarily back squat right now does not mean you don't need to be going through ankle, knee, and hip flexion, right, in a squat pattern, right? We need to figure out the right things to do that. There are modifications to this. We can do this. There are protocols that can be implemented based on your very specific situation, if we know what that is, right? If you're just taking everything at face value, don't squat anymore, and you treat your body as if it's a fragile thing, guess what it's going to be? Fragile. It's going to be very fragile. And you should expect what will happen with fragile things after that. They're very easily broken. And they're certainly never going to be as strong or stronger than they could be. We talk about professional athletes. Like, one of the guys that comes to mind for me is Peyton Manning. Arguably probably one of the best quarterbacks that will ever play the game. I was not a huge fan, but he went through the neck injury there late in his career. And he'd gone an entire career being a top-level quarterback, right? Playing in the Super Bowl, right? Gets messed up. I don't know if this happened before the Super Bowls or not with the Colts, but he gets messed up, and he basically has to take an entire year off of playing in the game. And his entire life, he'd never done that before. He'd never taken a game off or a season off. And it wasn't that he was taking the season off. What he did was he spent less time on the field playing football and more time off the field practicing the fundamental and foundational movements of building strength, right? And the conditioning piece that were the foundations for then making him a better football player when he finally returned to play. But he never had that time because it was season after season doing the things that they'd always done, because that's the things they always do, right? And I remember listening to him in an interview going, look, I am stronger, I am more resilient than I have ever been, because he took that time out to work through that injury rather than I'm just going to take time off and hopefully it heals itself. There was a very, very specific return to play, and as a result, he came back, and I believe he did win 2 Super Bowls after that. I think that's how that worked. I think it happened. I can't remember in the order, but that was very specific to me. And we've used the Tom Brady example a ton of times, like all the different professionals that he's worked with to be probably, arguably, the greatest quarterback, at least in that we know of at this point, in terms of wins and all the things. When you start looking at metrics, the point of that being is he came up with some injuries along the way too. And over time, he came into the NFL not a very fit, he had a lot of skill and a lot of talent. I mean, you could still watch him, like they put up his picture, like his shirtless picture. He's standing there in his boxer shorts, just looking like
540, couldn't bench
like
225.
This dude looks like a soup sandwich, like how's this guy going to play, in the NFL? And that's what they said publicly about him, right? And he held a grudge, man. He held a massive grudge, and it ended up paying off for him in the end. But he changed all that because he worked through those things. But again, going back to the working through injury, I think that's the first thing is people like, I can't do this. And so there's a fear that's associated with that. That's one of the biggest things that comes with injury, and being able to get past that. And I think a lot of what it takes to get past an injury is to understand what the return to play is, and that this will be a process, right? And we have to set up that process correctly. And if you go through the process, you stay patient with it and you trust it, you will then be able to reevaluate as you go through, like, okay, I've been through doing this a month, and this is where I was, and this is where I am now, right? And then, okay, now I readjust, right? And this is where I am now, and then this is where I need to get to, and you go through that same process over and over again, and you can reevaluate. Injuries aren't death sentences, but they can be prolonged if you try to ignore them, thinking they're going to go away.
One saying going through my head right now is you either find an excuse or you find a way. You can either use that injury or hurt piece as an excuse to not do something, or you can find a way. Now, going back to what you were saying, you can find the easy way that's going to take a little bit longer. You can go through a little bit more of a strenuous way that's going to get you back faster. It just depends on your drive, essentially.
Yeah, and what's available to you in terms of resources. And I would say this too, you have to take responsibility to be your own advocate, which means, because nobody's going to do that for you. You have to do that for yourself. And it's okay not to know. What's not okay is not to ask the questions or be seeking the better answer. And I'm not saying go to 5 different people and take 5 different pieces of advice or whatever and throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. But my point of there, I think, in wrapping it all up, is that's one of the strengths in the team here, is that we have those individuals or those professionals on the team.
Yes, we do.
To be able to, so, and even those people were involved in putting the basic programming together in the first place. Again, I said there's not going to be an injury prevention program, but there are programs that stress the most important things: strength, right? Which is the basis for expressing the movement that we're trying to train. Yep. You have to be able to move, right? So get that, then build some strength around that so that you are building integrity around joints, tissue quality, those kind of things. The way we've programmed, I mean, it looks like exercises on paper, but there's a lot of depth to that, right? And then on the flip side of that is, like, again, working with guys like Dr. Chris, right, who is a physical therapist, and having Jake on the team as a physical therapist, to be able to go like, hey, how do we, knowing what we know about this population, how do we help them try to avoid these things where we can, but also be able to step in and help them when they hit a roadblock, whatever that is, which is inevitable. You stay in it long enough. And again, I think what I would leave this with is, if you're feeling hurt, right, if you're feeling discomfort in some level, man, that's a sign. Like that's your body telling you something. So like, I get the stay tough, stay in the game, no days off mentality. I hear that, but think about that longer term and what that could mean for you. The best capability is availability in my mind. So if you can't play, right, and you get pulled off the field, like that's the thing that I think it hurts people the most, right? And that's the biggest fear, which leads to the problem, which is being pulled out of the game.
Yeah.
So as a result, like they go into this weird frame of mind where it's like, oh, I'm just going to ignore that and it'll go away, or I'll work around it. I'm not going to tell anybody, I'll just do the thing, or I'll figure out a way around it versus addressing it. Like address it. We can help you with that. And so once you're a client with us, or whether it's on a team or you're working with one of our individual programs, like you are our client. We have a vested interest in seeing you be successful. And if you have a question for me that I can't answer, I got two guys sitting to my left and my right that I could go to for answers, or I can go outside of that and go to guys like Chris, yeah, right, to ask, or I could go to Jake to ask, or we have relationships with many of allied health professionals that we could refer to, or at least
all kinds of areas, all corners of the country. We have a depth of network of a bunch of different physios, PTs, ATs, all over the place, that if you're in a certain area and need help, reach out to us and we can connect you with the right people.
Yeah, and I think the plus of all that is it's likely we've dealt with this before. Like you're not alone. There's
not a new injury under the sun.
Yeah, there really isn't. I mean, again, it's knees, backs, and shoulders. And, it makes sense why. Like we understand why it's probably a problem. We program appropriately to address a lot of those, what we know will likely be a problem if it isn't already. Mm-hmm. We're just asking you to be a little bit more aware of what your problem could be. Mm-hmm. It's likely, if you've been doing this a long time, and if and you're taking this seriously, and it's a big part of your life, too. So if you have questions about how to to deal with any of that stuff, or you're completely unsure, you don't even know if you have an issue or not, but there's been this nagging thing, you have this sense, dude, just reach out. Like, again, it's so easy to do that. We're totally available on social media, through Instagram, or directly through our website, or wherever. You can hit us, inextremisperformance.com, contact page there. Hit us up. Let's have a discussion about it. And I would also say this, I put this out there. If there are things like that you guys as an audience would like to hear about, like I would love to know that, to hear us maybe talk more in depth on. Like hit us up, tell us what you want us to talk about, or what you want us to, what you want to hear from us. That's helpful for us to connect and give you guys the information, education, knowledge, and direction. Yeah, that you need to be successful, because that's what this is about.